Hello, good and faithful people of the Church of the Mediator, as we move together toward this sixth Sunday after Pentecost, this Sunday, July 17th, which will be our second family Sunday of the summer. I hope that you, our families, will join us in worship at 9 a.m. and then following to decorate cupcakes together after the liturgy. That is this Sunday. And I do remind all of us at Mediator that we should be bringing in our donations for Thanksgiving in July for the Grace Food Bank through the 24th. I am back from the 80th General Convention of the Episcopal Church in Baltimore. Of course, I was not a deputy, but I was working for the General Convention Secretariat behind the scenes as a text editor, entering amendments to resolutions as deputies proposed them. But I wanted to update you all a little bit on what happened at General Convention. So first, I remind you that the way that General Convention works is that there are two houses, two legislative houses: the House of Deputies, which is a group of lay people, priests and deacons elected from the dioceses of the Episcopal Church at their annual conventions. And that is about 750, 800 people. And they come from all over the Episcopal Church, not just the United States, but the Episcopal Church has dioceses in Europe, in Latin America, in the Caribbean, all over the world. Folks came together and joined in the legislative process in the House of Deputies. And then there is the second house, which is the House of Bishops, which is where the bishops from all over the church come together in legislative body as well. In order for anything to become an act of General Convention, both of the houses have to concur. So even if a piece of legislation originates in the House of Deputies or originates in the House of Bishops and it passes that house, it has to be concurred by the other house in order for it to become an act of General Convention, a resolution that has passed and a piece of legislation that is binding for the Episcopal Church. Debate happens on the floor of both houses around any resolution and about whether resolutions are going to be passed, and then they are voted on by the people. And that can be a majority vote, a simple majority, or a 2/3 majority, depending upon the resolution. Sometimes it's a vote by orders, whether clergy or lay. Depends in the House of Deputies, the resolution. But I want to talk briefly about a few of the things that happened at General Convention, that voice of the gathered church. First is that the House of Deputies elected a new president and vice president. For the past 9 years, the past 3 General Conventions, the president of the House of Deputies has been a priest from the Diocese of Ohio named Gay Clark Jennings. She has finished her terms, her 3 possible terms, and the House of Deputies elected Julia Elia Harris, who is a lay woman from the Diocese of Oklahoma, who herself is of Mexican-American ancestry. She is the new president of the House of Deputies. And the former vice president of the House of Deputies for the past 3 General Conventions has been Byron Rushing from the Diocese of Massachusetts. And to succeed Byron Rushing as vice president is Rachel Tabor Hamilton, who is a priest from the Diocese of Olympia. Of course, as is normal at conventions, we passed a budget, the budget for the next 2 years, because the next General Convention is a shorter window this time, because this General Convention was a year later. So 2 years, 2023 and 2024, the Episcopal Church budget, which is about a $50 million budget per year, and the management and stewardship of about $600 million in investments. So you can imagine that is quite a piece of legislation to pass through both houses, the budget for 2023 and 2024. There was a time of recognizing and remembering the first women at General Convention that began. Women started to be elected in dioceses to be sent as deputies to convention in the late 40s, but were not seated. That means even though they were elected in their diocese, they were not given a seat at the convention until 1970. Not that long ago, that women were invited into the full process of the governance of our church. And so we remembered a number of women who served as deputies, but who were not welcome on the floor of General Convention in the House of Deputies. There is an important reunion of the Diocese of Northern Texas with the Diocese of Texas, and that was approved by convention. Those will now become one diocese again. There was the approval of the mission of Navajo land to elect their own bishop from among their people. There was a piece of legislation that is inviting the Episcopal Church to do some digging and to be honest about our history with regard to boarding schools for Native Americans, and to examine the ways that we have abused and mistreated folks of Native American ancestry and descent. There was a piece of resolution looking also, likewise, into encouraging a full audit of the financial resources of the Episcopal Church and to see where we have gained wealth from folks who were enslaved in the past. And so that is an audit taking account of our historic racism and the ways that we have benefited from it. There was a piece of resolution about caring for and being more intentional about including folks who suffer from mental illness. There was a piece of resolution to include Bishop Barbara Clementine Harris, who was the first woman bishop in the Episcopal Church in the Anglican Communion. 1988, she was ordained, to include her now that she has been born to eternal life, to include her in our calendar of those whom we commemorate as lights of the world in their generation, as saints. So Bishop Barbara Clementine Harris will be on our calendar of saints. And then finally, a big piece of legislation that went through General Convention was a first reading, because changing constitutional documents requires two general conventions. That's a 3-year interval between in order for them to be ratified. But what happened was we talked about a resolution that provided greater ease for trial use of new material for the Book of Common Prayer, and greater ease for the approval of alternative and supplemental liturgies by single general conventions. So that was a first reading. It will take another reading in 2024, when the 81st General Convention will gather in Louisville, Kentucky. But it's an important step for us as we think about, for a new generation, looking toward revising our prayer book or supplementing our prayer book and the liturgies that we need in order to be a church that is agile and responsive in our day and age. So that's a kind of quick rundown in 9 minutes, 10 minutes of the various things that went through General Convention. It was an exciting General Convention. The spirits were good on the floor of the House of Deputies. Folks seemed to be in a positive place, and a place of hope and energy for the future of our Episcopal Church, one of the great gifts of which is our democratic process for governance that includes not just clergy, but lay folks integrally as well. So thanks be to God for the Episcopal Church. Thanks be to God for the 80th General Convention. And I look forward to seeing you all on Sunday. Blessings.